Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and get you the essentials on big topics. Today, it's biology. Straight into foundations of life itself, actually.
Yeah, we're using Chapter 1 of Campbell Biology in focus as our map, you could say.
And the goal?
Well, it's about giving you a shortcut, really. A way to grasp the sheer diversity and complexity of life. We'll hit the big unifying ideas, especially evolution, and, how scientists actually figure things out.
Okay, let's start with something concrete. You mentioned this mouse, Paramuscus polionotus.
Right, the beach mouse. Picture these little guys on, say, the bright white sands in Florida. Their fur, it's really light, kind of dappled, blends right in.
Perfect camouflage.
Exactly. But then you go just a bit inland, find the same species, and boom, darker fur. Matches the soil, the plants there.
And this isn't just looks, right? It's survival.
Absolutely vital. Against predators like hawks, owls, you blend in, you live, you stand out. Well.
So the big question is,
Yeah.
how? How does this perfect match happen? It's not just chance, is it?
Definitely not chance. And that question, that's really about adaptation. It leads us straight into the main themes biologists use to make sense of everything.
Because biology is huge. How do you even start?
Well, you use a framework. There are 5 big unifying themes: organization, information, energy and matter, interactions, and the big one, evolution.
Okay, like the operating system for biology.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
We can touch on the first 4, but then we really need to dig into evolution. Kind of ties everything together, especially that mouse example.
All right, let's start with organization. Life isn't just a jumble, it's structured.
Right. You can look at it on different scales. Imagine zooming way out, like from space. You see the whole biosphere.
Yeah.
All life, everywhere.
Okay, then zoom in.
Maybe to a specific place, like a mountain meadow. That's an ecosystem. It's the living stuff. Plants, animals, microbes, plus the non-living stuff like soil, water, sunlight.
Got it. And within that ecosystem,
You've got the community, which is all the different species living there. Then maybe focus on one species, like all the lupine flowers, that's a population. And then one single lupine plant is an organism.
and we can keep zooming in, right? Inside the organism.
Yep. You go from the whole organism to organs, like a leaf on that lupine. Organs are made of tissues. Tissues are made of cells. The cell is really the basic unit of life.
And even inside the cell.
You find organelles, like the chloroplasts doing photosynthesis. And organelles are made of molecules, like chlorophyll. It's this amazing hierarchy, from molecules all the way up to the biosphere.
What's really key here, you said, is that new properties pop up at each level.
Exactly. Emergent properties. They arise from how the parts are arranged and interact. They weren't there at the lower level.
Like your bicycle example. Parts in a box don't get you anywhere.
Right. But assemble them correctly, and suddenly you have transportation. That ability to transport you emerged from the organization. Same in biology. Chlorophyll molecules in a tube can't photosynthesize,
But arrange them just right inside a chloroplast, inside a cell.
and boom, photosynthesis happens. Life uses this principle constantly. Thoughts emerge from networks of neurons. An ecosystem has properties its individual organisms don't. It's fundamental.
So studying the parts reductionism, like looking at DNA, is useful, but it's not the whole picture.
Correct. It's super important, but you also need systems biology to understand how the networks interact to create those emergent properties.
Right.
But how does your body clock work? That's a systems question.
And this idea of structure and function seems tied in here too.
Absolutely. They're like two sides of the same coin at every level. A bird's hollow bone structure makes flight possible function. A leaf's flat shape maximizes light capture. Analyzing structure gives you massive clues about function.
And the cell is central to all this organization, the smallest thing that's truly alive.
Everything life does happens first at the cellular level. And there are 2 basic types you mentioned.
Prokaryotic and eukaryotic.
Yeah. Prokaryotic cells, bacteria, archaea, are simpler, generally smaller. No nucleus, no membrane-bound compartments inside. Think of them as like efficient studios.
And eukaryotic cells.
That's plants, animals, fungi, protists, us. They're usually larger, more complex. They have a nucleus holding the DNA, and lots of specialized compartments, organelles, doing specific jobs.
Right.
Like a house with different rooms.
Okay, so that's organization. What about the second theme? Information. The blueprint.
Right. Life depends on storing, transmitting, and expressing genetic information. And that information is encoded in DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid.
which is packed into chromosomes.
Exactly. And segments of DNA are called genes. These are the units of inheritance you get from your parents. They carry the instructions for building all the molecules a cell needs.
And that structure, the double helix, it's elegant. 2 chains, nucleotides A, T, C, and G.
And the sequence is everything. ATTGC means something different from GCTTA. It's like a 4-letter alphabet forming biological words.
How does the cell use that information?
Through gene expression. Basically, the sequence of a gene gets copied into a messenger molecule, mRNA. That's transcription.
Okay.
Then the cell reads the mRNA sequence to build a chain of amino acids. That's translation. This chain folds up into a specific protein, which then does a job in the cell, like the crystalline protein making your islands clear.
And the amazing thing you pointed out, this genetic code is pretty much universal.
It really is. A sequence that codes for, say, the amino acid tryptophan in a bacterium also codes for tryptophan in a human. It's incredibly strong evidence that all life shares a common ancestor. Deep down, we're all related.
Which connects to things like genomics, studying whole sets of genes.
Precisely. An organism's entire genetic library is its genome. Genomics studies these whole genomes, and proteomics studies the full set of proteins, the proteome. New tech lets us analyze this massive amount of data using bioinformatics.
All right, theme 3. Energy and matter. Life needs fuel.
Yep, you need energy to do anything, move, grow, reproduce. And you need matter, building blocks.
Where does the energy come from, mostly?
The sun. For almost all ecosystems, sunlight is the ultimate source. Producers, mostly plants, capture that light energy via photosynthesis, converting it into chemical energy, like sugars.
And then?
Then consumers, animals, fungi, get that energy by eating the producers or other consumers. But here's the key. Energy flows one way. As it gets used, a lot is lost as heat. It doesn't get recycled back to the sun.
But matter does get recycled, right? Chemical cycling?
Exactly. Chemicals, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus cycle within an ecosystem. Plants take them up from the soil or air. Animals eat the plants. When organisms die or produce waste, decomposers like bacteria and fungi break them down, returning the chemicals to the environment.
So energy flows through, matter cycles around.
You got it. Constantly reused.
Okay, that leads nicely into the 4th theme, interactions. Nothing lives in a vacuum.
So true. Organisms are constantly interacting with each other and with their physical environment.
Like plants competing for sunlight, or bees pollinating flowers.
Perfect examples. Interactions can be beneficial for both, like the bee and flower. Or one benefits, one is harmed, like a lion and a zebra. Or maybe both are harmed, like 2 plants competing for scarce water.
And interactions with the non-living environment, too.
Definitely. Plants taking CO2 from the air, releasing oxygen, roots breaking down rock, animals breathing air, drinking water. It's a constant exchange.
And human interactions are a big part of this now.
A huge part, and often disruptive. Burning fossil fuels is the major one. We've released enormous amounts of CO2.
Leading to global warming and climate change?
Yeah, that trapped heat is raising global temperatures about 1 degree Celsius since 1900, maybe 3 more by 2100. And it's changing weather patterns, causing more extreme events.
We see the impacts already, right? Melting ice, species struggling to adapt?
Sadly, yes. Polar bears losing hunting grounds is a stark example. It really underscores how interconnected everything is. Our actions have far-reaching consequences.
Okay, so those are the first 4 themes. Organization, information, energy and matter, interactions. Now for the big one you mentioned.
Evolution. This is the core theme, the central unifying concept of all biology.
It explains, well, everything. Both how similar life is and how incredibly diverse.
Precisely. Think about the unity of life, like that shared genetic code, or the similar bone structure in a whale flipper and a bat wing. That points to common ancestry.
But also the diversity, the millions of different species, each adapted to its own way of life.
Right, and the explanation comes largely from Charles Darwin, his book on the origin of species. It was revolutionary.
He proposed descent with modification. What does that mean exactly?
It means that species living today are descended from ancestral species, but they've accumulated modifications or adaptations over time as they moved into different environments. That explains both the shared ancestry, unity, and the adaptation's diversity.
And the mechanism for this change?
Natural selection. This was Darwin's brilliant insight. He based it on a few key observations.
Okay, what were they?
First, variation. Individuals in a population aren't identical. They vary in traits, and many of these traits are heritable.
Like different coat colors in those mice.
Exactly. Second, overproduction. Organisms produce more offspring than can possibly survive. Think of fish eggs or dandelion seeds. This leads to a struggle for existence.
Makes sense. And the third?
Adaptation. Species generally seem well suited to their environment. Again, think of the mice or a cactus in the desert.
So variation, overproduction, adaptation. How does that lead to selection?
Darwin inferred that individuals whose inherited traits give them a higher probability of surviving and reproducing in a given environment tend to leave more offspring than others.
So if you blend in better, like the beach mouse on sand, you're less likely to get eaten, more likely to have babies.
Right. And those babies will likely inherit the good camouflage trait. Over generations, favorable traits accumulate in the population. The environment selects for advantageous traits.
So natural selection is the driving force behind adaptation. The mice didn't choose to change color. The environment favored those that happen to have the better color.
Precisely. It's a gradual process acting over long periods.
And we can map these relationships out like a tree.
Yeah, the tree of life. It shows how different lineages branched off from common ancestors. Those shared four-limb bones in mammals. Evidence of a common ancestor far back on the tree.
Like the Galápagos finches Darwin studied.
Classic example, an ancestral finch likely colonized the islands, and then different populations adapted to different food sources on different islands, leading to different beak shapes and eventually different species. That's radiation and descent with modification in action.
How do we organize this vast tree? You mentioned domains.
Right, the broadest categories are the three domains. Bacteria and Archaea, these are the prokaryotes, single-celled ancient life forms. And Eukarya, everything else, all organisms with eukaryotic cells.
And within Eukarya?
We have the kingdoms like plantae, plants, the photosynthesizers, fungi like mushrooms, they absorb nutrients, and animalia, us, we eat stuff. And then there are the protists, a diverse bunch of mostly single-celled eukaryotes.
It all traces back, ultimately.
Way back to those early prokaryotes, maybe 3.5 billion years ago. And that universal genetic code is like a fossil signature from that shared beginning.
Okay, so we have the big themes, especially evolution. But how do biologists do all this? How do they figure things out?
That brings us to the process of scientific inquiry. It's not some rigid step-by-step recipe, despite what some textbooks show. It's more flexible, more dynamic.
It starts with just looking, observing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Observation is key. Using your senses may be aided by tools like microscopes or satellites, and you record those observations. That's your data.
Data can be descriptions qualitative or numbers quantitative.
Exactly. Like Jane Goodall describing chimp behavior versus counting how often they groom each other. And from lots of specific observations, you might generalize that's inductive reasoning. Every living thing I've examined is made of cells, so maybe all organisms are made of cells.
But what about explaining why things happen?
That's where hypotheses come in. A hypothesis is a tentative explanation for an observation, and it has to be testable. It's like an explanation on trial.
And you test it using deductive reasoning, the if-then logic.
Right. If my hypothesis is correct, then I predict this specific outcome if I run this test. Like your desk lamp example, hypothesis. Bulb is burned out. Prediction. If I replace the bulb, then the lamp will work.
Simple, but it makes the hypothesis testable.
Crucially, yes. And you can never definitively prove a hypothesis is true. You just gain confidence as it survives more tests. And there might always be alternative hypotheses you haven't thought of. Science deals with testable, natural explanations.
Let's loop back to the mice one last time. How is that studied scientifically?
Well, Francis Sumner had the initial hypothesis back in the 1920s, coat color is camouflage. Much later, Hopi Hoekstra's team designed an experiment to test it.
The clay models?
Yeah, brilliant stuff. They made hundreds of models, painted them light or dark, put both colors in both habitats, beach and inland.
So they compared non-camouflaged models to camouflaged ones in each place.
That's a controlled experiment, right? Exactly. The independent variable was the color they manipulated. The dependent variable was the amount of predation measured by bite marks from predators. By only changing the color, they could isolate its effect.
And the results.
Clear as day. The camouflage models got attacked way less often in both environments. Strong support for the camouflage hypothesis and for natural selection shaping that trait.
Okay, so hypotheses get tested. What about theories in science? People use that word loosely.
Very loosely. In science, a theory is much bigger than a hypothesis. It's broader in scope. Think the theory of natural selection versus the specific mouse hypothesis.
And it leads to more questions.
Yes, a good theory generates many new testable hypotheses. Like, the theory of evolution predicts we should find transitional fossils, and we do.
And it's backed by a lot of evidence.
A massive amount. Years, decades, sometimes centuries of testing and observation from many different fields. But even theories can be modified or overturned if enough contradictory evidence piles up. Science is self-correcting.
It sounds like science isn't done by lone geniuses in labs.
Not usually, no. It's a very social process. Collaboration is huge. Results need to be repeatable by others. Findings get scrutinized by peers before publication peer review.
And having different perspectives helps.
Immensely. Diversity in science, different backgrounds, viewpoints, experiences leads to more robust questions, better interpretations, and a stronger scientific community overall.
Okay, let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot from just one chapter.
We have. The big takeaways. Biology has unifying themes. Organization, information, energy matter, interactions that provide a framework.
Evolution driven by natural selection is the core theme explaining life's unity and diversity. Think of those mice.
And scientific inquiry is the dynamic process observing, hypothesizing, testing through which we learn about the natural world. It's collaborative and self-correcting.
And understanding this isn't just for exams, it helps us understand our own health, the environment, really, our connection to everything else alive.
Absolutely. It's fundamental knowledge for navigating the modern world.
So, a final thought to leave everyone with.
Well, given how deeply connected all life is through evolution and that shared genetic code, what incredible things might we still learn about ourselves, about the human story, by looking closely at the genes of organisms that seem really different, like some microbe living in a hot spring, or even just a common tree? What secrets are still hiding in plain sight within that universal library of life?